Our ancestors were running around on the savannah, and that's what we're built to do. Our bodies, if we're sitting around eating all the time and not feeling cold, not feeling too hot, our bodies become complacent and they don't fight back against disease and aging.
If you can't run because you say, well, my knees have gone and I live on a hill, what do you think about rebounding, using a mini trampoline and getting out of breath that way?
Great. Yeah, I've done that before too, especially in winter, it's useful.
Yeah. Do you think that's as good as running if you really work up a sweat on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I heard that the anti-gravity part of rebounding was that the aerodynamic was really good for your lymphatic system. Do you think that's true?
Makes sense. No, I hadn't heard that. That's really interesting.
Okay. What about sex? Because I've always believed that having great orgasms is incredibly anti-aging, because most animals don't mate for anything other than to recreate. So I think your mind, when you're having a lot of sex, believes that you must be young because that's what young people do. They mate in order to pass on their genes. And I've studied a lot of people in blue zones. For those who don't know it, you obviously know it. It's where people naturally seem to live a long life. And people who live to 100 often say that they had a lot of sex, even in their 70s. So talk about that and how having an active sex, and particularly for women being orgasmic, can slow down aging.
Well, it's tough for a lot of women and some men that they lose interest in sex towards the latter half of their life. But clearly, moving is important. I don't know about orgasms being important for aging. I think someone should study that, or maybe you know more than I do. But there's no question that sex gets your breathing rate up, your heart rate up, and could be part of a healthy lifestyle. It's not too unenjoyable either. So I think that's a good tip. The problem I find talking to clients of mine and friends is that for a lot of people, whether they're in a bad relationship or just hormonally deficient, it's not as interesting anymore.
Well, I think you're right. And of course, if we're doing what you say, if we're eating less and looking after our bodies and working out and feeling younger, the minute you feel it, you think, well, I feel like I could have sex again because now I feel young and vibrant. It's that thing about, well, I'm lying on the sofa eating Pringles, I haven't worked out, and I feel really kind of, ugh. And the last thing I want to do is take off my clothes, show some of my body and have sex, and they don't look so hot either. So I'm not interested. But I think it all comes together when you do young activities and you feel young. I think it helps you to maintain a sex life. And of course, women, especially when you orgasm, you make natural killer cells that do slow down aging. And you make hormones that fight depression. So I think it's very important, if you can, to keep having sex, because for women, much more so than men, it has an anti-aging effect, because your mind goes, hey, I don't care how old you are, you're clearly making a baby here. And if you're making a baby, I'm going to have to keep you healthy enough to raise that baby, at least until it's old enough to take care of itself. So it's quite interesting, sex, because your mind doesn't just want you to make a baby, it wants you to raise it. So the point in making it and leaving it on its own. So we are wired to reproduce ourselves, but also to raise that baby. And so, yeah, there's so many things we could do, but what else would you recommend? So far, I love what you're saying. I love the dieting. I love the fact we can do any kind of exercise in order to get out breath and stress our bodies. What else?
Well, these are the easy things that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm a molecular biologist. I'm not a fitness trainer, but I'm a scientist. I can read things. The other thing that I do is, I did more before the pandemic, was plunge myself into cold baths of water and go in saunas, because there's some good evidence, particularly in the sauna area, that's also healthy. And that could also be working through the same mechanism of putting your body into a state of perceived adversity to fight back.
Yeah. Do you think that's what my friend's doing, that cryotherapy? Is it cryotherapy, where you're going into like going into the freezer for 3 minutes? Or I know Wim Hof very well, who sits in the ice bath. So you think the heat and the ice have the same effect?
I think so. The science isn't conclusive just yet. But what's clear is that if you look at people who regularly go in saunas, they have much lower rates of cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
So that to me says there's something important going on there. The ice baths, it makes sense. You can build up what's called brown fat, speeds up your metabolism. Brown fat's very healthy as opposed to your white fat, which builds up around your belly. Brown fat's around your back usually. And so that theoretically could be a way that cold shock therapy is beneficial for longevity.
And you can do that just by having a 3-minute ice cold shower, can't you? Or does it have to be longer than that?
No, 3 minutes is all I can take anyway. After 3 minutes, I'm pretty much done. But I don't do the cold showers. I'm not sure. I think a shower for me is supposed to be pleasurable. But
yeah,
you can jump in a pool which isn't heated, or if you're really good at it or want to do something, there are professional places you can go, commercial places, to get either in a mist of liquid nitrogen, which I've tried a few times. But at my gym, they just had a 4 degrees Celsius water bath that I would walk into, and 3 minutes was enough.
Yeah.
My son, though, who's at the time was 12 before the pandemic, he could stay in there 15 minutes or more. So a lot of people have different tolerances for these things. But you do what you can, and 3 minutes I think is sufficient.
And if you use hypnosis and go in there and say, I'm super warm and I'm really chilled, because they did some studies where they get people to put their hands in buckets of ice, but if they made themselves say, this is warm, this is warm, this is warm, they could tolerate it for much longer, rather like when you're walking on coals and saying, cool mass. It's amazing how you can endure more, even running, if you tell yourself, I love this and this is great. So why do you think that some people age so quickly and become old before their time? We know there are old people who look and act young, and then there are young people who look and act incredibly old. Why do you think some of us age way before our time?
Well, there are a lot of reasons, but the good news is that when you look at twin studies, there's one from Denmark, that only about 20% of your health in old age is genetically written into your genome from your parents. The rest is up to how you live your life. And there are some things that you can do, as I mentioned, to slow that down. And if you don't do them, then you'll speed up. And we all age at different rates, and we can measure that with this epigenetic clock, it's called. And so what you find is people who smoke are older than their twin or the general population. Those who become very heavy, who don't eat the right foods, and who are stressed out. And what we're also learning is that the type of food that you eat, as I mentioned earlier, is very important. So all of those things combined actually get you another 14 years on average of healthy life. There was a Harvard study that came out last year about that. And that's just the easy stuff. I think most people have heard it, maybe not in the level of detail that I'm talking about. But what I'm also excited about are taking things to the next level to get people into their 90s and beyond, even into their 100s, and still work if they want, play tennis, hang out with the great grandkids. That's the future that I think is actually capable or possible with the science that we now know.
I wanted to ask you a question, because I heard you talking somewhere else about how you can take a swab of the cheek, and by looking at someone's blood, you can tell them pretty much when they're going to die. How many people actually want to know that?
That's an excellent question. Well, I was sitting for lunch with my business partner, and she said, I bet you a lot of people want to know their age, especially if they can reverse it, which I believe we can give advice that would help. And so I sent out a tweet, and we got back the number with thousands of responses, that 93% of people said, heck yeah, I want to do that test. And so we decided to form a company on the spot. That was early this year. And we're now building this company. We have a test. We have reduced the cost of the test by 1,000-fold. And in fact, if we have a website, if anybody would like to get on the list to have this test taken and be some of the first to sign up.
Because of course you're not saying, hey, I've got your blood, you're going to die at 72, you're saying, well, you're predicted to die at 72, but if you're only 60 now, you've got 12 years to start doing some things that will push that age further out and further out, because it's never too late to take some action to slow down aging.
Yeah, it's not even one number. It's a number that will change over time, and it'll be cheap enough that everybody, not everybody, but most people will be able to do this every few months to see if their change in diet and lifestyle is working for them. Otherwise, we're flying blind. We don't drive a car without a dashboard. Why do we do this with our bodies? And so that's what we're building. We're going to have a dashboard for the body and provide real information and direct them to real products that we've tested that are what people say they are. And so the sign up for that, if anyone would like, it's drsinclair.com, and you spell out the word doctor.
I think I'm going to take that test. It reminds me of, I met somebody, I had a client who came to London, he was French, and he was just looking at the particular type of English girl who likes to go out and get drunk and party. They're not all like that. And he said to me, it's really amazing. He said, French women do everything to prolong their looks, and English girls seem to want to destroy them as fast as they possibly can. I went, yeah, it's a really interesting observation that a French woman is very preoccupied, I must preserve my looks, and an English girl is, I'm just going to go out and get trashed and have a great time, and I'll sort that out later. So I think I'm going to take that test. I'm going to get my husband to take that test too, because actually you're right, it's not scary. It's like a warning. Look, here you are, but you can do something about it. And many people have said, it's only when I got a heart murmur or I had a heart attack that I thought, wow, that's a warning sign. And now I'm suddenly going to do better. And I guess some people who get cancer do that. They say, well, I decided to, really look after myself. But then others say, well, what's the point? So I'm always talking to my guests about how to master their mindset, because people like you are so fascinating, because you've taken an everyday event and become a master at doing something. So can I ask you when in your life you've most needed to really master your own mindset? And what helped you and who helped you?
So every day I want to get better. That's my mindset. And I've been working towards this goal of helping everybody on the planet live healthier since I was age 4. So it's been a lifelong goal. But there was a time where I almost quit. It was too hard. I was going through hard life with 3 kids, tough marriage. And then my science was attacked by 2 of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world.
They attacked you, did you say?
They did. They said, my science is wrong. One of our discoveries, the major one. And a lot of people just believed the pharmaceutical companies because, of course, they know better than this one guy at Harvard. So what I did, I was in bed for a week. I couldn't get out. I guess it's as close as ever I've been depressed. But I'm proud of myself that I was able to say, well, I can't spend the rest of my life in bed. And I know when I die, I'm going to regret not fighting. So I got out of bed, went back to work, and pulled a team together and worked on this to see if it was true. Were we right or were we wrong? We just needed to know. And it took about 2 years. And then we published a paper in Science that said, yeah, we were right and they were wrong. And that took a lot of willpower. And I found out that I was more resilient than I realized.
Yeah, I mean, some of the best people in medicine and in alternative health have been attacked and besmirched. I'm trying to think of the guy who wrote Sugar Blues and the guy who actually discovered what childbed fever was, septicemia. They were both ridiculed, diminished, and then they realized not long later they were absolutely on target. I mean, the guy who developed septicemia actually died in a mental hospital. It was a terrible thing, and because he was the one who said it's doctors not washing their hands going from a mortuary to delivering a baby. So first they attack you, then they accept you, and then they believe in you, and then they usually say later, well, he was amazing. So I'm glad you came back from that, because it's very hard when you're innovative and you get attacked by somebody as big as Big Pharma because they're so powerful. But we live in a world where people are less likely to believe everything a drug company says anymore, and that's a good thing. So that was your hardest time. Something else I'd like to ask you, because you have a wife and 3 children, are they all on board with eating the way you eat and exercising the way you exercise?
No. Well, my children are so young they don't have to worry about it.
How old are they?
18, 16, and 14.
Right.
Boy, younger boy, girl, and then the oldest is a they, so non-gender. And they're great. They're very scientific. They're very different, weirdly talented in their own way.
Do they eat the way you eat?
The lifestyle that I'm talking about is for people in their late 20s.
Oh, right. Because I was trying to imagine getting my daughter, who, of course, at that age, they want to go out with their friends and drink. They often smoke just because they think it looks super cool. They want to go to Pizza Hut and McDonald's because that's what they do. I mean, I work with a lot of autistic children, trying to get them to eat a better. And they say the same thing. I already feel different to every other kid on the planet. And if I can't eat McDonald's and pizza now, I feel even more different. And I really get that it's so hard for kids when they're expected to do this strict diet, or when all their other kids are having milkshakes and chocolate.
Yeah, and the one thing that I would say is that the childhood obesity is something that's a problem in the West and increasingly rest of the world. And the food industry has a lot to do with that, and schools over here in the US.
Yeah.
Just terrible food, pizza and all that.
Oh, awesome.
That I would love if we could solve that problem, because the epigenome, which is the regulator of your genes, changes. And this is the clock. And having a lot of excess weight will speed up the clock no matter what age you are. The clock's ticking from birth. It's a fallacy to say when you're 20, you're not getting old. But other than maintaining a healthy weight, I think kids should be kids.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you then. I mean, I think you should get your kids into healthy eating and allow them to go and have a pizza with their friend or a burger at weekends, but definitely don't serve that stuff up at home. I know with my daughter when she was little, I had 3 glasses on the windowsill, and I put a filthy coin in one and a baby tooth in another and dirty jewelry in another, and she just watched that Coca-Cola strip out, and she's never drunk it to this day. So I never said you can't have it. I said this is what it does. It eats everything in its path. So that worked better than banning it. I think when you ban stuff and kids are like early teenagers, the more you ban it, the more they want it. But when you allow it in moderation, it's a bit like in France where they allow children to have a small glass of wine. I don't know if that's a great thing. I would never do that. But they have a much lower rate of people having a problem with alcohol because it's viewed as something you do moderately at the weekends. So it sounds like you've done a great job with your kids. And then everyone's going to ask, but what happens when I go to dinner parties? Because I have a really healthy. People say to me, oh, God, it's so boring. What happens when you go out and people invite you around? I was just doing a school. I did my school for the last 2 weeks in a country manor house just outside London. It was amazing. It was on Jacobean Manor, but they were providing food. And the first day they provided macaroni cheese, which I just wouldn't eat. And so what do you advise people to do when they have work events and functions, or maybe they're a rigger on a TV show and they're constantly bringing in pizzas and burgers and cakes? And how do people cope with that pressure if their social life involves eating, or even if their life involves going out to dinner with clients? I mean, I know you do it because it's your passion, but how would you advise other people to do this when they say, well, I've got a husband and 3 kids and I've got this, and part of my job is entertaining. How can I do it? What would you say? Because of course you've been in the medical field, so you know that too, that often you're out and don't always carry all that food with you. But how do people make this a lifestyle when they feel the odds are stacked against them? Yeah.
Well, you don't try to do what I do from day one. You work up to it. You might skip breakfast for one week. and replace it with some coffee and tea. When you go out, I go out most nights every week, actually. Was out with the whole family at a burger place. I eat regular food. I try to avoid a lot of red meat and fried foods, but other than that, I'll have French fries. I'll eat a bit of cake occasionally. But I know it sounds silly, but it really does come down to eating in moderation.
Yeah.
I'll sample things. I'll often share things. And it's very rare that I go home feeling full. In fact, I can't remember the last time. Actually, I did eat a fried chicken sandwich about 2 weeks ago, and I still regret it. It took me 2 days to recover because my body and my microbiome in my gut was not used to it. But the point here is you can eat essentially anything, but try to bias it towards the kind of things that I mentioned, and just don't overdo it. It's so easy to just from habit, sticking things in your mouth. And breaking that habit is the hardest thing. And it takes at least 2 weeks for you to get over that habit. And once you're in the lifestyle that I'm in, and I'm not that strict, right? I'm not thinking about this all the time, then it feels weird to be putting so much into your mouth, and especially the kinds of foods that are super sweet and very fatty. And you just want to work your way slowly to that. It could take 2 weeks, could take a month. But it does take some willpower. It's not going to just happen by itself, but it's so worth it. Like what you said earlier, Marisa, that you feel so much better about yourself when you've got a physique that is more youthful. And it's not just that you can walk better, you feel better, you jump out of bed better, you probably have better sex. What I think is the main thing that I love about it is that I'm proud of myself for having done this.
Check out my next video here. Anyone notice that as that day comes around, they're sick? Because here's how the mind works. You say, oh my God, I volunteered to chair that meeting. I must have been out of my mind. I'd die if I've got to go on stage. I don't want to do that. And your brain's like, leave that with me. Now next Wednesday.